Her name was Beulah. Back in 2003, she was 84 years old, standing at a cosmetics counter in a department store in downtown Atlanta, and the young woman behind it had just asked her what she used on her skin. Her face, under the bright lights of that counter, was smooth in a way the young woman could not quite account for. And so she had asked, the way you ask someone for a secret. And Beulah told her. She named everything on her shelf at home, plainly, the way you would tell a stranger the way to church. The young woman wrote nothing down. Not one thing Beulah named was sold at that counter. Not one. That is the whole story, right there if you want it. But stay with me, because there were 13 things on that shelf, and every one of them is still made today, and you can still buy most of them for a few dollars. Her whole cabinet, the cold cream and the witch hazel and the tin of cocoa butter, cost almost nothing to fill. She did not own a skincare routine. She owned a shelf and a way of doing things her mother had shown her at the kitchen sink, and one quiet belief underneath all of it that the counter could never sell her. We are going to count all 13 down. Number 2 is the thing the soap makers quietly took out of the bar about 100 years ago and have been selling back to you in a finer jar ever since. And number 1 is not a product at all. It is the reason the whole shelf worked. She grew up on a street like Sweet Auburn, where every older woman kept a version of the same shelf. None of them called it skincare. They called it getting ready in the morning. So come back with me to the icebox and the vanity and the little bottle with the pencil mark on the lid. Feed it, shade it, and let it be. That was the whole secret, and it was never really a secret at all. Number 13. She never owned a bottle of morning face wash. Every morning for 50 years began the same way: cold water and a clean cloth. But here is the part most people miss. Not cold from the tap. The tap in an Atlanta summer ran warm. She kept a bowl of water in the icebox overnight so that by morning it was truly cold, cold enough to make her catch her breath. She wrung the cloth out, pressed it to her face, and held it there. No soap, no bottle, just that. Cold water will not work miracles, and she never asked it to. What it does is wake the skin and firm the look of it and take down the puffiness of sleep, so the face that met the day looked rested and clean. The face wash aisle needed a morning step it could sell you. If the honest answer was a bowl of cold water from the icebox, there was nothing to pour into a bottle. She kept that bowl in the icebox to the end of her life. Number 12. A tall bottle of Dickinson's Witch Hazel. A few cents at the corner drugstore. One bottle lasting her the better part of a year. She had reached for it since before she could say why, because her mother had, and her mother before that. A Connecticut man named Thomas Dickinson had been bottling it since 1866, drawn from the bark and twigs of a plain little shrub, and it tightened and freshened the skin without stripping it the way harsher things did. Here was her trick. A cotton ball drinks up most of the witch hazel before it ever reaches your face, so she did not use cotton balls. She cut an old pillowcase into small squares and kept a folded stack of them by the bottle. A flat square of cotton gives nearly all of it back to the skin. She pressed it flat to her cheek and held it, 10 seconds to a spot, instead of wiping it across and throwing most of it away. The shops still sell it today, the rose kind for a few dollars. Hers did the same work for pennies. Take one breath here with me. If a bottle or a jar on this list has already turned up on a shelf in your own memory, that is exactly why I make these. Now, back to the count. Number 11. The white jar of Pond's cold cream with the green lid sitting on her vanity. It cost little and it lasted. She used it at night, never in the morning, to take the day off her face. Cold cream lifts away the dirt and the makeup without water and without dragging at the skin. But the trick was in how she took it off. She did not rinse it. Rinsing leaves half of it sitting there on the surface. She pressed a soft cloth to her face and lifted the cream away, the day coming up with it, wiping nothing, pulling nothing. Slow, the same way her mother had shown her at the sink. The jar with the green lid is still on the shelf today, and the price has barely moved. Number 10. A small bottle of castor oil from the pharmacy, a few cents, and she made a single bottle last more than a year. Every night before bed, she ran a little along her edges, the fine baby hairs at her hairline, and a little along her brows and her lashes with a clean wand. This is one of the old practices, passed hand to hand among Black women for generations. Castor oil is thick and slow. It coats the fine hairs and seals them against drying and breaking, and it leaves the lashes and the edges glossy and dark. Her trick was dry lashes only, because the oil slides straight off wet ones, and never near the inner corner of the eye, where the thin skin turns tender if the oil creeps in. She kept the date she opened each bottle penciled inside the cabinet door, so she always knew. The lash counter is a whole industry now, sold in little tubes that cost more than she spent on her whole face in a year. Her bottle cost less than a loaf of bread. Number 9. The yellow box of Argo cornstarch on the pantry shelf, a few cents, lasting most of the year. She used it for two things the beauty counter would later sell on their own. First, dry shampoo, worked into the roots the night before, never the morning of. That timing is the whole trick. Put on in the morning, cornstarch sits on top and shows white no matter how you brush. Put on at night, it has the long dark hours to drink up the oil while she slept, and by morning, it brushed out clean and unseen. Second, dusted lightly through a cloth, it set her face powder, and the powder is worth stopping on. For so many years, the powder was Overton's High Brown, made by the Overton Company out of Chicago. It was the first face powder ever made for the skin tones of Black women by a Black-owned company, back in a time when a store like Marshall Field's would not put a single product for her on its floor. A man named Anthony Overton, the son of enslaved parents, built that company from a baking powder business into one of the largest of its kind in the country. She powdered her face with a piece of history every morning and never once thought to call it that. Here is a line Beulah never drew. The line between the bathroom shelf and the kitchen cupboard, between what goes on the body and what goes in it. The cold cream and the cornstarch sat on the very same shelf in her mind. That line, the one that splits a beauty aisle from a baking aisle, two budgets where there used to be one, was drawn later by people who needed it drawn. So the next things on her list do not live in the bathroom at all. They live in the pantry, between the flour and the vinegar. Number 8. Half a lemon, kept cut side up in a little dish in the icebox. 2 evenings a week she took it out and rubbed the cut face of it over her elbows, her knuckles, and over any dark mark on the backs of her hands. The acid in a lemon is a mild kitchen version of the very thing the shops now bottle and sell as an exfoliant. A lemon gave it to her gently, soft enough to use again and again, enough to keep her tone even over the years. But there was one rule, and the rule was the whole thing, never before going out into the sun. Citrus on the skin and then sunlight can burn and darken the very marks you are trying to fade. So, evenings only. Always rinsed clean before morning. She knew that rule long before she had the word for what it prevented. The lemon cost a penny. The rule cost nothing, and it was worth more than the lemon. Number 7. The blue tin of Vaseline that never seemed to empty. At night, she dampened her skin, then smoothed the thinnest film of it over her face. Not a thick coat, a trace. The jelly does not feed the skin, it seals it, and it locks the water she had just put there against the skin so that nothing escapes while she slept. The trick is the damp underneath and the thin hand on top. Too thick, and it just sits there shining. A trace over slightly damp skin, and she woke with her face soft and full. That jelly had been in American homes since 1870, when a young chemist named Robert Chesebro cleaned up the wax that oil workers wiped on their cuts and burns. A few years ago, the beauty world rediscovered exactly what she was doing, gave it a brand new name, and built a whole following around it. She had been sealing her skin this way for 60 years. The tin cost about $1, and she used half of it in a lifetime. Number 6. The blue bottle of Philip's Milk of Magnesia, a few cents at any drugstore, sold for an upset stomach. She used it on her face. A paper-thin layer under her powder soaked up the shine, softened the look of her pores, and held her powder in place through a long, hot day. That use was never printed on the bottle. It moved from one woman to the next on their own say-so, the way the best of this knowledge always did. Stage actors had used the very same trick for years to keep their makeup from sliding under hot lights. Her trick was a barely damp sponge, never a finger. A finger lays it on too thick, and it goes chalky and flakes by noon. A barely damp sponge leaves a layer so thin you cannot see it, and you let it dry. A full 3 minutes before the powder goes on. In an Atlanta summer, her face stayed matte from the first hymn clear through to supper. The blue bottle is still on the shelf for pocket change. Number 5. A small jar of lanolin from the pharmacy, one jar lasting half a year. She knew why it worked. Lanolin is the grease from sheep's wool, and it is close enough to the skin's own oil that the skin takes it in instead of fighting it. The trick was the amount. A pinhead, not a pea. A pea-sized dab sits there greasy for 20 minutes, which is why most people decide it does not work for them. A pinhead, warmed across both palms and pressed onto damp skin, sinks in within a minute or two. And the pressing matters. Rubbing wakes the grease up and moves it around. Pressing sets it down and lets it be. She learned that from her mother, at the same sink, with the same hands. One pinhead a night, and the jar lasted into the next season. Number 4. The brown and gold tube of Palmer's cocoa butter on her vanity, the one nearly every woman on the street kept too. She warmed a little of it between her palms until it melted soft, then pressed it into her skin while it was still damp from the basin. Cocoa butter is rich in the fats that keep skin soft and springy and help old marks slowly fade and even out. The trick was the warmth and the damp. Cold from the tube, it sits on top and never sinks. Warmed in the hand and pressed into wet skin, it melts in and stays. Her elbows, her knees, her face, the backs of her hands. The shops sell that very same cocoa butter today beside a dozen pricier jars that promise what it was already doing. She paid almost nothing, and her skin held its softness into her 80s. Number 3. For her, this one was not a jar at all. It was what had happened to her soap. The old soap, made the old way from fat and lye, made 2 things at once: soap and glycerin. Glycerin pulls water out of the very air and holds it against the skin, and for a long time, the 2 stayed together in the bar. That is why the old soap left the skin soft instead of tight. Then the big soap makers worked something out. The glycerin was worth more taken out and sold on its own to the cream companies. So they pulled it from the bar and sold it off. And what was left cleaned harder, stripping the skin's own oil along with the dirt and leaving it feeling tight. That tight feeling is not your skin getting clean. It is your skin with something taken from it. And the same companies that pulled the glycerin out sold it back to you in a bottle as the moisturizer your new soap now made you need. She never got caught in that circle. She kept a little bottle of glycerin and rose water on her shelf and patted it on while her skin was still damp. It put back exactly what the new soap took out. Nothing was invented. One thing was moved, and the woman who bought both ends paid twice. She only ever paid once. Number 2. The thick cream she kept in a plain jar from a nut that grew half a world away. Shea butter pressed from the nut of a tree that grows across the savanna of West Africa, where women have made it by hand for centuries and passed the making down from mother to daughter. They call it women's gold. They have used it there for longer than anyone can count, to guard the skin against the hard sun, the wind, and the long dry season. She did not need a label to tell her about a thing her own people had carried with them across the water. She warmed the raw cream between her palms, a little nutty in the air, and pressed it into her face and her arms. Raw and unrefined, never the whipped and watered-down kind. The shop sells shea now as a luxury, they say they discovered. They discovered nothing. The cream had crossed an ocean in the keeping of grandmothers, and it never once stopped working. Her jar cost next to nothing. Number 1. Beulah did not have a skincare routine. She had a shelf with 13 things on it, each one bought without reading a label. Each one used the way her mother had shown her. And under all of it sat one belief. Her skin was not a problem to be fixed. It was something that already knew its own work. Her part was only to feed it, to shade it from the hard sun, and otherwise to stay out of its way. Every single thing on that shelf either helped her skin do its own work or simply left it alone. The counter in that Atlanta store was built on the opposite belief, that her skin was broken, and that the next jar, and the one after that, would fix what the last one did not. That is the one thing a counter can never sell you, because the moment you believe it, you stop coming back. She believed her skin was good as it stood. She fed it cocoa butter and shea and glycerin. She shaded it under a wide hat in the garden. And she let it be. Feed it, shade it, and let it be. Sit with that a moment, because it is the thing we have quietly let go of. It was never that she had some magic the rest of us lost. The lemon was just a lemon. The cold cream was a few cents in a glass jar. There were no miracles on that shelf, and she would have laughed at the word. What she had was not magic. It was enough. A shelf she trusted, a few dollars, and a way of doing things handed down at a kitchen sink. She knew what was in everything she owned because she had bought it for pennies or grown it in the yard, and she knew that it was enough, and so she did not lie awake wondering if she should be doing more. We have so much more than she did now. A shelf with 40 bottles where she had 13, a different serum for the morning and the night, for the eye and the neck. each one quietly promising that the last one was not enough. We have endless choice, and underneath it runs a low hum she never had to hear. The worry that we are still behind, still not doing the right things, still not doing enough. That is the trade. Not one of these things was lost. You can buy every one of them tomorrow, most for a few dollars, still right there on the shelf. What we let go of, one new product at a time, one promise at a time, was her quiet certainty that a clean face and a kind hand at the end of the day was already enough. Feed it, shade it, and let it be. Beulah had it all along. So let me say the thing I think you came to hear. Your grandmother was not behind the times. She was not going without, and she was not simple. She had something we are now paying specialists to teach us back to ourselves. And she had it for pennies, on a shelf between the flour and the vinegar. She knew her skin did not need very much. A little grease against the cold. The sun kept off. Something gentle and something clean. She knew the face in the mirror at the end of the day had already done enough, and she let it rest. If you grew up watching a woman like that, watching her warm the cocoa butter between her hands, watching her press the cold cloth to her face in the gray morning light, you were watching something real and good and wise. Missing it does not make you foolish. It makes you someone who remembers something true, something that counter still cannot explain. So tell me one thing before you go. What is the one jar or tin or bottle your grandmother kept on her shelf? The one you can still smell the second you close your eyes. Put it in the comments. I read every single one. And until the next time, be good to the skin you are in. It has been doing its quiet work all along.